Hello. So good to see you. God bless you. Good morning. How are you?
Find yourself. Happy Easter.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Easter to you, Father. Wonderful. I know you've not been feeling great, but it's good to see you in better health.
Thank you very much for your visit.
Of course. And thank you for seeing me. Pray for you every day. God bless you.
Io prego per lei ogni giorno, che Dio la benedica. Grazie, Santo Padre.
Happy Easter.
Imagine being like one of the last people to see the Pope alive.
Hello family, welcome back to another episode on my YouTube channel. We'll be looking at different reaction videos from both black and white Americans on the passing of Pope Francis. After meeting with the Pope, J.D. Vance has faced a number of criticism. Pope Francis died on Easter Eve, Monday morning. A number of US citizens have come with the conclusion that J.D. Vance meeting the Pope, it was a kind of mysterious meeting. Let's watch step by step.
So the Pope requested J.D. Vance's presence yesterday. The Pope has been very critical in his sermons and digitally about the mass deportations. And J.D. Vance met with the Pope personally yesterday, hours before he passed away, so that the Pope could tell him in person how much he disagrees with this and does not like that J.D. Vance has used the Catholic faith as reasoning for behaving this way. Like, the most important Catholic person summons the energy, uses one of his last breaths to tell you that he doesn't agree with you. What an absolutely insane and wild moment. This meeting was so important to Pope Francis that he had sent someone else to do the Easter service, and I'm certain he knew it would be his last one. But he chose to meet in person with J.D. Vance. And I hope J.D. Vance carries that and knows that the most important thing to an ailing pope is to tell him that he should not be using his faith to hide behind with what he is doing. It's like a movie.
I just uncovered something, and this is going to shock. When J.D. Vance met with Pope Francis, did you catch the handshake? The class. Those that know, and those that know have to be silent about things like this. But look at his handshake here. And look at his handshake here. And look at J.D. Vance's handshake here. And J.D. Vance's handshake here. And J.D. Vance's handshake here. And J.D. Vance's handshake here. But look at his handshake here. Let me give you a better look and pause for a second for those discerned minds. Now I give you Exhibit C, Exhibit D, Exhibit E. But what are we talking here? It's just a handshake. Nothing to see here. None of this is fact. This is just J.D. Vance's last meeting with the late Pope Francis. Rest in peace.
Well, I think the Pope said, I have seen Satan in real life. J.D. Vance, get me the hell out of here. The look that he gave him. Yeah, I am sure that he saw Satan and all of the demons of hell in J.D. Vance and said, that's it. Time for me to go and talk to St. Peter.
I used to say this as a joke, but now I'm convinced I was right this whole time that he has a demonic frequency. Because he was the last person Pope Francis saw before he passed away. He met with J.D. Vance and said, peace out, Earth, you're on your own. Because, this cannot be helped.
J.D. Vance is so insufferable that the Pope took one fucking look at him and said, you know what? I have fought cancer, Nazis, the devil himself, but this Ohio gremlin, I'm out. The Pope survived hospital visits, organ failure, and the Italian healthcare. But one J.D. Vance handshake, and the Pope said, Jesus, take the fucking wheel. I'm not strong enough for this GOP jump scare. Pope really said, Lord, this trial, it's too great. Beam me up. Honestly, though, I can't blame him, because if my choices were small talk with J.D. Vance or death, I'm packing my sunscreen and tankini for hell. You pass me a margarita in the fam, because Lucifer, baby, I'm coming. Imagine the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, looks at you and says, I would rather meet God than meet you. Oh my God. I know JD Vance is crying like hell. I genuinely choose to believe that this is true. And I mean, God knows that social media isn't going to fact check us anymore, so.
JD Vance was fortunate enough to meet with Pope Francis on Easter Sunday, praying for his good health.
A few moments later.
Pope Francis has died this morning. That man went into the hospital, got double pneumonia, came out just so he could tear JD Vance a new ass, and then died. Like, literally the day after Easter? Is this just a continued sign of things to come? Look, all joking aside, though, this is a terrible time. I know that it may shock a lot of you, but I'm actually a Catholic, so this is going to be a time of mourning for a lot of us. And yeah, what a hopefully the new Pope will bring in some fresh ideas and rejuvenate the papacy and hopefully lead us in a better direction, because right now humanity seems to need a leader better than the ones we've got.
I can't imagine being JD Vance and having to hear the Pope be like, speaking to God, he said you suck. That's what he said.
I did not kill the Pope. It was way more nuanced than that. I was telling the Pope about how Digimon, digital monsters, had gotten too erotic. And then he interrupted me about some Bible stuff, about how the meek shall inherit the earth or whatever. That is not in the Trump Bible. So to be polite, I changed the subject. So I said, can you believe the poors don't thank me more? And then he said something about a camel fitting through a rich guy's pee hole. I said, language, being easier than getting into heaven. And then I said, you know who I think would make a good next Pope? That guy, the pickup artist. He's already wearing that gay hat. Plus he does this really cool thing called negging, where you tell a lady her butt stinks until she marries you. Then he said, Mamma Mia, and then gave me the silent treatment. And then he died to make me look bad. If the Pope hates you, are you a bad guy?
If you're not Catholic, you may not have noticed the ways in which JD Vance embarrassed himself during his 30-second interaction with Pope. But I'm going to point out a couple of things, so let's review the footage.
So good to see you. God bless you. Good morning. How are you?
Find yourself happy Easter.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Easter to you, Father.
It doesn't surprise me that the Pope signaled that JD Vance had not really earned an audience with him, because he was not even prepared to greet him properly. If you were to greet the Pope, have an encounter with the Pope, you would address him as Your Holiness. The second thing is you do not need to bless him. You do not need to say God bless you to the Pope. That's entirely unnecessary and somewhat inappropriate. The third thing is referring to the Cardinal as Father. Cardinals are addressed as Your Eminence. I'm not sure why JD Vance converted to Catholicism. It doesn't appear to me that he has any respect for the theology, the canon, the doctrine, or the culture.
Immediately he steps into the room and I just got the most evil presence. Like the vibes were so off.
Yikes.
So, okay, let me paint you a picture. So I was sitting there in my gown, per usual. I was serving.
I know, that's right.
And he walks up to me and he shakes my hand, and it's the clammiest, like shakiest, sweaty palm
No.
I think I've ever touched. And I'm sorry, it's okay. It literally felt like I was shaking hands with the devil.
Oh, myself.
I knew that I was shaking my hands with the Antichrist. It's okay, Diva.
I'm sorry.
I'm
thinking
let your
about
tears
it.
out. You don't have to see him anymore. You're safe with me.
Thank you.
Oh my God, it was literally so awful. Oh my God, and the smell, odor. Oh my God, he literally smelled like chili. Chili, like not like a good chili, like a bad chili, like chili that's been sitting in the sun for a couple of days. Ooh, it took me out, honestly.
Rest in peace to the Pope, but that man said I would literally rather die than spend time with JD Vance. And I'm not religious, but honestly, that's a teaching that I can absolutely get behind.
How do you have such chronically bad vibes that the Pope dies hours after meeting you? It gets to a point You know, like, JD's gotta be looking in the mirror like, ooh, maybe I should make some changes. I know he's not doing that. There is no way he's doing that, but he should be. Can the omens get any more obvious? We clearly have an antichrist on our hands. I mean, you have sold your soul to get into the White House with the worst man on the planet who is actively destroying millions of lives. And then and then you meet up with the Pope. And the Pope, your vibes are so bad that the Pope dies afterwards. Bro. Oh my god. Pope Francis went out in the most admirable way, ripping on JD Vance and then praising Jesus. Hell yeah. Amen, brother.
It's Joe from Georgia. So has anyone noticed lately that everything that JD Vance comes in contact with, it seems to result in a bad outcome? Number one, he went to Greenland, and the funniest thing that he said there was he didn't know it was cold in Greenland. Okay? But it was. And nobody wanted to meet him when he was there. Then, the next thing that comes up, the Ohio State football team comes to the White House to celebrate their national championship. Well, JD Vance breaks and drops the trophy. Folks, that's live and in charge on TV. He did that. And now this past week, he went to Italy for vacation. And what happens? He meets with the Pope for a few minutes. A few hours later, the Pope is dead. So I don't know if I'd want to invite JD Vance to anything, because it pretty much appears wherever he shows up, something's going to happen that's just not what you want. So let's just keep him away from people. Enjoy your vacation in Italy, JD.
The Pope's last documented act on this earth being calling JD out for being a fake Catholic. Baller way to go. Drop the truth, peaced out, dipped. The man was a lot of things. A lot of them were good, so fly high, dude.
The Pope's last meeting with anyone on this planet was with JD Vance. And not only that, even though the photos look quite cordial, apparently the Pope, who was too unwell to do this himself, sent a cardinal to speak to JD Vance and say, listen, the way that your administration is treating migrants, treating people who are different, treating people who are American citizens, sending them to El Salvador is very, very not in line with the faith. Sort yourself out. And the last thing this guy does before he, meets his boss is says words to JD Vance. Essentially, his last breath is like, hey, don't be like this. You can change, do better. And, remember, JD Vance has been beefing with the Pope on Twitter. This is not there's testimony. It's wild. It's like, I couldn't write this down in a book. And, if I was an ardent, faithful person, and the head of my faith passed moments after the meeting with me, I'd have a crisis of faith. I'm just going to throw that out there. It would really affect me and make me think, shoo, am I doing something wrong? So, yeah, wild.
Back when I lived in his district, I visibly remember voting against JD Vance in 2022. I was so upset when he won, and then a couple years later, he becomes our vice president. Flash forward to 2025, the entire world now thinks he is the Antichrist and responsible for Pope Francis's demise. I won. R.I.P. Pope Francis, coolest Pope ever.
So the bad news is that Pope Francis died, which is sad because he was really cool. But the good news is that nothing embarrassing that you or I have ever done or ever will do could be anywhere near as embarrassing as JD Vance meeting the Pope, the Holy Father, the leader of the religion that JD willingly converted to as an adult, and the Pope being so disgusted and repulsed by JD that he actually lost his will to live entirely. I mean, how humiliating is it that Pope Francis used his dying breath to condemn JD, and then he peaced out to heaven, where he knows that JD will never, ever find him. I don't know about JD, but that would probably drive me to a really dark place. Especially if I had also broken the national championship trophy of my alma mater just a few days before. I'd replay those things in my head again and again. So thank you for that much needed perspective, Mr. Vance. But I do think that he's probably the Antichrist, and to be safe, we should burn him at the stake.
So you mean to tell me that Pope Francis, an anti-Trump critic, his last private encounter, his last private meeting was with Vice President J.D. Vance, and hours later he died? He passed away? See, Pope Francis had been recovering from double pneumonia, and while he really didn't have all the energy to be participating in all of the formal events that the Vatican had planned for Saturday, he still made sure to muster the little bit of energy that he had to meet up with Vice President J.D. Vance for a meeting that only lasted a few minutes. He wanted to give off some good, Easter greetings, as well as let them know his final thoughts, and I do mean final thoughts, on the Trump administration. The information that I'm about to read off to you is coming from an article that can be found on USA.com. So the Pope and the Vatican officials have criticized several of the policies of President Donald Trump's administration, including his plans to deport millions of migrants from the United States and his widespread cut of foreign aid and domestic welfare programs. Francis has called the immigration crackdown a disgrace. Vance, who became Catholic in 2019, has cited medieval era Catholic teachings to try to justify the policy. So I guess he was trying to tell the Pope that there was religious reason for these mass deportations. I don't know. But the Pope rebutted the theological concept that Vance tried to use to defend the crackdown in an unusual open letter to the U.S. Catholic bishops about the Trump's administration in February, and called Trump's plan a major crisis for the United States. So even though this man was fighting double pneumonia, he couldn't even be present for the actual official duties for the Vaticans that they had planned for Saturday. He still made sure to have this meeting that only lasted a few minutes with Vice President J.D. Vance to let him know his final thoughts of how he feels about this administration, and then he passed away in his sleep in the early mornings. That's crazy.
With the following videos, you see how Americans react to passing of Pope Francis. Many US citizens claim J.D. Vance had no blame on the death of the Pope. Do you believe in above statement? If yes, give me a reason on the comment section below, and don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you, family. Bye.